Is your existing supply chain and logistics consultancy provider failing to deliver? Our experienced, thought-leading team at Loguru could be your choice for an intelligent and friendly professional supply chain. If you have a challenge in supply chain, procurement or logistics, or maybe just want to improve the value you get from them, visit loguru.co.uk. Complete end-to-end satisfaction guaranteed.
Coming up in this episode.
It was clear and concise what we were asking for. It was a very tangible issue to the people we were asking. They could see it. We did this by taking a number of ministers to dinner at a truck stop. And there's true, and the one member of Parliament, and I won't name any names, and we met at a truck stop somewhere in the Midlands. I invited him to have something to eat. His response was, "But I'm a vegetarian. There's nothing I can eat on that menu."
The Logistics Collective podcast is a series focused on the logistics industry, where there are many incredible stories to be told. We'll be speaking with those who've worked and are working within the industry today. What have been their experiences, good and bad, since joining, and would they recommend a career in the industry to others? Here's your host, Malcolm Pope.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Logistics Collective, the podcast. And I have with me today somebody who is a tremendous industry leader, and we've actually interviewed him before. And in fact, he was the first interviewee on Logistics Collective. And so now we've been going for about 2.5 years, and we have done literally dozens of interviews. I felt it was time to come back and say hello to Richard Smith, who's Managing Director of the Road Haulage Association, and to really get a view of what's happening in the industry at the moment, because there are lots of challenges and changes. So hello again, Richard. How are you?
Good morning, Malcolm. I'm very well, thank you.
Can we remind people about what is the purpose of Road Haulage Association, or as most people in the industry call it, the wonderful RHA?
We certainly can, and indeed in the last 2.5 years since we last spoke, there's been quite a lot of change in the industry, and we as the Road Haulage Association has morphed and continued to develop. So the RHA is the leading dedicated trade association for truck, vans and coaches. So any commercial vehicle, tarmac and wheels. We've got 8,000 members spanning across 10,000 operating sites, accounting for over 250,000 trucks on the road, which is 55% of the overall fleet. And it's been in existence for 80 years now. And during that 80-year period, it's had a number of different challenges. But the mission today and the drive and the focus of the RHA and the strapline, which I think describes it down to a T, is about driving business on the road. So the Trade Association represents, makes representation, informs, and is being informed by the members of the industry, the key stakeholders in the industry, and in the collaborative approach, we support the industry and the economy and the social eco infrastructures around the country in everything that we do, or 90% of what we do. Because 90% of what's in your room or coming in my office came on a vehicle sometime.
I'm just wondering about the 10% that didn't. I would absolutely argue. I think it would be a real interesting game for people to play in their own workplaces or offices. Go and find something that didn't at some point during its existence be on the back of a truck, and I think you'd really struggle. I think you should be saying 99.99999%.
I think you might have just given me my next marketing campaign to promote this industry, Malcolm. I think you might.
So, Richard, what's the current weather forecast for the haulage industry? What are the current challenges? What do you see?
There's a number, and I'll start off with one of the key drivers in the industry. Literally, the drivers is the people. And for a number of years, the industry has seen an aging workforce where there's been more people leaving than coming in as well. So if you look at some very simple stats, drivers between the age of 56 to 65 account for over 37% of the workforce. So that's a big number. If you take that and compare it to other sectors within this country, that number usually sits around between 25 and 26. So you've got a significant 25% of us, once again, part of this industry, that is aging and is heading towards retirement. One of the challenges that we have as well is because of the nature of the job, because of the support from a facilities perspective and infrastructure perspective, it tends to be a sedentary job. So the options of moving from your seat every 4.5 hours, moving around that we're encouraged to do from a well-being as well as a mental health position is very challenged, and it's very demanding role. So it's not a difficult job in terms of what you need to do on a day-to-day basis. It's a profession. Being a driver is a profession, but it's a profession that's been overlooked and undervalued in recent years. One of the other challenges, so that's people on one side, sits around the business environment in which haulage operates and the view that they have of themselves as businesses. So in the last 12 months, the industry has seen 450 hauliers leave. They've gone into administration due to commercial challenges, economic challenges. That stacks up against the previous year of 330. So there's been a significant increase. This year, because of the economic outlook, because of how the country's got quite a severe weather forecast itself in a certain number of areas, we're expecting that to potentially top over 600. Okay, so the industry is going through a change. It's going through a change and a challenge around the skill of the drivers. And it's not just drivers, it's also the transport managers, the planners, the people who come into this industry tend to be aging. Not as much as the drivers, but it's an aging workforce. It's going through the commercial and economic challenge of, there's a high number of leavers due to the fact it's a low margin industry. Typically, I remember the industry will operate on 5% or under as a margin. There are some large organisations that enjoy larger margins. But if you look at the first two sectors that typically this industry represents, so that could be agriculture, it could be quarries, it could be retail, it could be pallets, it tends to be 5% below. What he's seen in the last 18 months is a 10% increase in running costs. So if we exclude fuel, so I'm excluding fuel at this point, and just look at the running costs of a vehicle, they've gone up 10% year on year in the last 12 months. Bear in mind, this is a low margin industry, so all that pressure is driving the number of people leaving. The reason for leaving the industry, yes, there's administration. Two, if I'm honest, Malcolm, they're not giving up. They decide it's best time to sell up because there's other challenges facing the industry. So the third is around the road to net zero, or the lack of road to net zero, if I may put it in that respect. So there's uncertainty around what the future fuels are going to be, which drives in uncertainty around cost, which drives in an uncertainty around skill set required to support that new technology. So really, if I was to summarise the outlook for the industry in the next 10, 15 years, the key area to focus around the people, like most industries, bringing in that next generation, developing the role to making it more acceptable to that generation and making sure that the profession of being a driver and the people working in this industry is recognised as that and is promoted as that, and people are made aware of that through school curriculums, etc., etc., etc. The road to net zero, it's around giving the industry some clarity and some certainty. Okay, yes, it might be electric, it could be hydrogen, it could be gas, it could be HVO. So it's a certainty and clarity which will drive the investment back into the industry. So the investment is not just financial, it's also people's time, and commitment to this industry. And we're also seeing at this moment in time, from a trading perspective, some challenges on moving goods in and out of the countries, whether it be to Northern Ireland or to mainland Europe, and adapting to life after Brexit. So I would say those are the key areas of focus. And you might note from that as well, I'm not particularly talking about technical issues around the trucks, because hauliers are businesses and it is part of the economy and we are the backbone of the country.
I'd certainly support that view. I mean, it is a shocking number of businesses that have, for a variety of reasons, but I think we could list them. Full well my own background in terms of managing and buying logistics, but what are the devices that are used to actually perhaps create misery? I think very often long payment terms. So that is a major point of pressure. But the logistics industry as overall does miracles, and yet it is, even in large scale, some of the larger logistics companies, single-figure percentage profitability if they're lucky. And I just feel it undervalues the industry. And I think that, which might sound like a changed view, but hey, maybe I've been on the road to Damascus. But the view now is that because of the challenge in terms of drivers, and because of the challenge in terms of the need to aim towards net zero, I never see net zero as a realistic destination. What we've got to do is to reduce our emissions. And there are a whole variety of ways of us being able to do that. And I, to be honest, I think there needs to be a little bit more intelligence in governance in terms of that. Addressing the number of times a truck is running empty might be one view. Let's actually make sure that when a truck is moving, it's one, being paid to move, and two, that in essence it really comes down to the intelligence that's applied above. But the driver question, we've certainly seen in terms of our driver workforce, who do an incredibly valuable job within the industry. Over my lifetime, I've seen it age. When I first started being involved, I mean, I've been a transport manager. I've run a transport office. I've employed drivers. I've done all of that. In fact, some would argue I used to do a proper job. But what we're seeing now, that sort of high level of more mature people that are within there, that really is a risk. I mean, the question I've got for you, Richard, and I know this is perhaps out of the blue, has there ever been a structured engagement of drivers in terms of finding out what they don't like about what they do and what they do like about what they do? So how could we actually change the shape of the role? Has there ever been anything like that done?
In terms of, and it's a really, really good question, because one of the things we did as a trade association 3 years ago, so this is just as we're coming into and out of the driver shortage, which was, amplified by Brexit. We actually took a conscious decision as a trade association to start to engage directly with drivers. So historically, the RHA, and as all trade associations, represents the body, it represents the haulier, it represents the business. We don't care about drivers. It's something that drivers used to and still do say it. The RHA just looks after the bosses. Because I'm using, some direct quotes that have been given back to me quite recently. And just winding it forward to only about 2 months ago, actually, Malcolm, we did a survey, and there's elements to this, so if you just bear with me for 2 minutes. We did a survey around DBS and the introduction of the direct business standards into London. And one of the questions we asked the hauliers was about the driver experience of going into London. And 95% of the drivers that go into London, this was across 800 haulage businesses, and it was large, medium and small, because this industry is 85% SMEs, less than 15 trucks. Okay, and then we have, as you know, 250 organisations that have more than 500 trucks, and then in the middle, everybody else sits. We as the RHA represent that broad church, so we have people that sit in all those categories. So when we get an 800 response on a survey on around $35,000 businesses that we believe exist in this country, statistically that's representative. Okay, so it's 90% representative of that class. And the drivers, 95% of the drivers said they did not like going into London. They did not feel welcome. They did not feel they were treated as professional drivers. They were, by the restrictions, and this is not a London-centric, this could be related out against any city, the restrictions due to space and the movement of something of its size. There's no facilities, there's no support. So when you speak to drivers, and we actively go out to truck stops, and last year we ran the kindness campaign, which engaged with 26,000 drivers, and it was to ask the driver what is the kindest location to deliver to, not just in terms of the infrastructure that surrounds the DC, the warehouse that would be going to typically, or to the high street shop. Is there somewhere to park? Are there restrictions, etc., but how you were treated when you arrived at that location? So they feel incredibly undervalued on occasions. Yeah, they do not feel that their role is respected as a profession, and it's just, you can be a driver. Now, as in any industry, there's some people that occupy that role, that will not be up to the standard of the majority of the drivers. But this country runs on professional drivers. I would not ask the question back, but suggest next time, you're in Europe and you're in France or you're in Spain or even Italy, and, you engage with the drivers over there and look at the facilities and the way they are treated and respected for what they do. I'm bringing 90% into my office. That is a key issue. Undervalued and not respected, 2 words I would use.
I wouldn't have any level of disagreement within this country. I've seen and actually travelled with drivers in prior roles in other countries. So I worked in the chemical sector, so it was often that, you would have pretty much an induction to actually get and understand what the job was like on, really on the ground. And the facilities were night and day different within there. I think we've got to have a little bit of a reflection back. I mean, for me, some of the issue comes out of quite often we look at the technology that we use to run our fleets, our transport management systems, and they're very like any other business system. They tend to have 3 core algorithms in them. So there's something about cost. There's something about quality. So that will either be quality of product or timeliness of service. And then there's a third element of legal compliance. And what is missing, as I see it, but I do see some sparks of innovation on its way, but it's still far off. How about that we're actually driving our systems on the basis of sustainability, and we optimize on that? And hey, here's a crazy thought. Why can't we actually operate our systems to make our employees or drivers happier? And the key question I would have would be, if the industry as a whole is perhaps not as attractive as it wants to be, my question, as an employer, my question would be, have you asked people what was the shape of the role that they'd like to do in the future?
No, I think that's a really, really good question. Just before I touch on that, just go back slightly, because I don't want to paint a picture of all doom and gloom.
No, it's not. It's a successful, vibrant industry that none of us could actually live without. Full stop.
Yeah. Actually, one of the just going back to your example there, going out with drivers. I feel like I should be interviewing you. Actually, not. You've got more experience than me. I went to one of the great joys of my job, and it is a joy, is going to visit our members. And they say, I get access, to all shapes and sizes of members in all sectors. And very recently, I was always with a member, 120 trucks, who is really embracing and sees it as being positive and financial opportunities, business opportunities to embrace future technologies and future fuels. So they have a fleet where they've got 25 gas trucks. They've just ordered 15 44-ton electric trucks. They've got 2 18-ton electric trucks, and they've got the latest in-cab technology. So they've got the AI that watches the driver, that flicks up and puts a screen alert out if there's unusual eye movement, or if there's unusual hand movement. That could be on the phone, or they could be falling asleep. And there's that movement, and you can feel the enthusiasm when you walk in. Literally, you can feel it across, whether it be the transport manager, the planner, or the driver. And I see, I don't walk around and met some of the drivers. I said, what about this in-cab technology? Big brother or sister watching you. And they said it's great. And that was wind back 20 years. To when I remember when the first reiteration of that technology came into the industry, was a forward-facing camera. Do you remember those? That was just looking out. They remember about looking in. And I was running an operation in a very unionised environment, and it was difficult to get the vehicles fitted. But now the actual drive, because the drivers saw it as encroaching upon their workspace, etc. But now actually these drivers embrace it, because not only does it protect them, it helps them in their job. So when they're doing deliveries, etc., or if there's an issue on the road, and the witnesses say it was A, B, and C. So I think in a very small way, if that makes sense, how technology can support and move this industry forward. And then when people actually see it works, and the people being the driver, the transport manager, the owner of the business, it's a really good example of how it's being embraced. And there's a number of examples like that. But the biggest challenge we have, because if you go ask a driver, is my sense, and it's probably one to go out and to confirm again, why is a driver going to drive it? What's this? So 20 years ago, I keep going back 20 years because it's the turn of the century. 20 years ago, and probably 15 years before that as well, when I started in the industry, it was that sense of adventure to some degree. You left on a Monday, you came back on a Friday, and you literally camped out in some cases, and still do, around the country, and you delivered, and you were critical, and you saw that criticality. Now, as everything's changed around us and evolved and developed, whether it be in supply chains or economies, the actual one thing that's not changed in this industry, particularly, in all of that, is the strategic road network. It's not got any bigger, particularly. It's not changing its diet, but the number of vehicles on it and the type of person driving those vehicles, whether it's from a facilities perspective, the restrictions from a planning perspective in terms of how you can improve that or build, the distribution centres in a more strategic place, are all adding to this inefficiency. And one point, going back to the low margin, is what could we do to improve the short-term return for hauliers? We could improve the efficiency of the network it operates in. That's not just strategic roads. It's the point you made, and a very relevant one, about adapting the latest AI intelligence, but also software that can help us eliminate empty running. I mean, we both know, that if you had, back in the day, if you had 15% empty running on your fleet, you were doing very well. So reversing your question, who delivers the 10%? What is that 15%? And what collectively as an industry can we do to move forward a significant mind change?
You're absolutely spot on there, Richard. And in addition, it's also load fill. So fine does a vehicle with one pallet on count as empty running, as an example. And this may well be ridiculous because, volume out or weighting out in terms of vehicle, but as high as 60% of vehicles are not fully loaded. I'm sort of intrigued. I think I'd like to put a nice and well-meant challenge to the Road Haulage Association. I would like you to go and create, with a vehicle manufacturer, a real driver cab of the future. So I would go and look at that and say, if we can find an additional 2 tons GVW to electrify vehicles, could we actually think about it differently? That if we're not using the full capacity of the vehicle, could we actually begin to make these vehicles incredibly attractive for people to stay in? So we look at the American big rigs that they have out there with the living accommodation on the back of them. I'm just imagining, something that is pleasant, great bathroom within there, sleeping, relaxing area, some technology, allow them to be able to talk to their family when they're away, not so worried in terms of whether or not there's space at a truck stop or parking out by the side of the road. Why can't we actually create what I would say is a truck really that would be about treating drivers truly with respect? I think that's a tough challenge, but maybe I might be barking up the wrong tree, but I think it's worthy of a thought.
I think it's very worthy of a thought, and I think it's a very good challenge, and it's something that in 2.5 years' time I will update it. How we're getting on. You might have seen it before then, but I think that brings in a whole world of, which we won't go into because it's not particularly about this is the podcast, but you get into size and weight and everything else, and it goes back to the point about the strategic road network. That all the motorways were built within 10-year gap of each other roughly in this country, and they're all falling to pieces at the same time. And until there's a significant step change in the level of investment and recognition in those areas, it'll always be a challenge. I mean, there was a statistic released 2 weeks ago, I think it was, that 1 in 4 bridges in this country cannot carry the weight of more than 44 tons. So when we drive towards building more wind farms, when we drive towards building more modular homes, the vehicles that are carrying those are these special goods, abnormal loads. They can be up to 80 ton, and they cannot go in their desired route efficiently, so they have to detour, which drives in more emissions, which drives in more cost, which frustrates the drivers. It's a fascinating subject that we could talk about all day, but it's so interlinked to, the overall economy and to our day-to-day lives, and it's that. We're going to have to find that 10% though, because it's a very good question that I can't think what that 10% could be, because everything links through to a big truck in some shape or form.
It does. I've got some background in looking at collaboration and all of that, and there are some answers, but perhaps it's not for today. But what I would love to do at some point in the future is have that infrastructure question. Because I always look at this notion. In the past, we had wonderful Victorian engineers that built things, and they built things in an outstanding way. And yes, it cost more, but ultimately, what's the long-term impact of that? We should be aiming and saying, dreaming out further, because quite often you might double the cost initially, but you will actually reduce the cost over the expected lifetime of the infrastructure that you're building. But moving on quickly, I've seen that you've recently published a manifesto for the road haulage industry. It really was very thought-provoking in terms of the information that was within there. What was the inspiration for this, and what are your aspirations for it?
The manifesto, which we're very proud of. We're very proud. We launched it at our parliamentary event in January. The reason why we produced the manifesto was to really crystallise the industry's focus, around the 6 priorities that drive this industry. It's not exclusively 6 priorities. Whether it be the infrastructure, whether it be facilities, whether it be skills, whether it be the road to net zero environment, and come up with some very clear, specific, relevant asks. And if you read it, you'll see that they're actually intrinsically linked. And the underlying theme, in fact, one of the key messages from the manifesto is how this can drive economic growth and this country and business. Okay, so it's not a significant step change from the people working in the industry. It's from us as the RHA to say, yes, we're a haulage business. The most regulated in this country is this industry. Point that people often forget. But we're business as well. We can support the growth of this country. When it's expanding, we're the backbone. When it's contracting, we're supporting. So the messages that were delivered and the asks were built around not just what our members need as haulage, but what they need as business people, and what this country needs and the key stakeholders as an enabler to grow, as an enabler to move, as an enabler to move people around the country from a tourism perspective, because we also touch that obviously with the coach membership. So out of the 22, and the pleasing news is out of the 22 asks that are in there, I'll just pick them up on one that's actually been granted, if you want to use that expression. So we asked for a cross-government, cross-departmental immediate task force to look at the challenge around driver facilities from a security perspective and from a standards perspective. So at any time in the UK, there's 11,000 spare vehicles that have got nowhere to park overnight or to take a rest. When you look at the stats, in the southeast, then the Golden Triangle, as we would know it, at any one time, recognised truck parking areas are at 93% utilisation, which we know means that the fault are bursting and there's no space available. And that's why that's driven to the parking down the side streets, retail parks and the lay-bys, etc., etc. That was around security. So freight crime is a growing issue, and drivers, when that's drive, they feel very vulnerable. Even in recognised parking areas, it's an issue. And last year, there was over 5,000 cases of freight crime, a massive number. And freight crime is not recognised as its own crime statistic within vehicle theft. So if it's a vehicle theft, it's a vehicle theft. It could be your car, it could be my car, it could be something from the back of a truck. Okay, so one of the things that we're looking for is to get that focus, so we can actually start to address the cars on drive forward. Anyway, so it says, so that has now been granted, that ask. So a task force has been set up across departmental government, made up of a number of trade associations, of DFT, of the Home Office, etc., etc., etc. And one of the reasons why that was granted, because it was clear and concise what we were asking for. It was a very tangible issue to the people we were asking. They could see it. They could see, we did this by taking a number of ministers and non-ministers to dinner at a truck stop. We have something to eat at a truck stop. And there's true, and the one member of Parliament, and I won't name any names, and we met at a truck stop somewhere in the Midlands, and I invited him to have something to eat. And his response was very, very true, but it was quite concerning. It summed it up very well. But I'm a vegetarian. There's nothing I can eat on that menu. So it's really important that, we think the manifesto, going back to your question, 22 clear asks are very tangible to people, and it's linked into your life, my life, everybody's life.
And are you going to be, on those 22 asks, are you going to be issuing a regular update in terms of what of those 22, what's the status of delivery against them?
Yeah, and it'll be continual update to the industry, because that's very important, as well as the stakeholders that we're engaging with, and to the general economy, because the fundamental. And we won't just keep it 22. I'm always a bit low, so I'm mindful in past people have had lists of top 5s and top 10s, and it's been the downfall. This is a very fluid, obviously. So it's 22 come out of this year's manifesto. We won't be judged against those 22. We'll be judged against the success on each of those. It might be 32 next year. It does not sound that we've not achieved the 22. This is really important to communicate what it is we try to do as much as everything else. But again, I go back to my point, Malcolm, that all of those 22, and certainly, from somebody who's worked in the industry and has had the experience and has got the expertise you have, you will recognise each one of those. They are easily recognised.
And very, very clear and very, very reasonable. And I think if people are interested in that manifesto, is it available perhaps on your website?
If you click onto our website and go into the news section, you will find the manifesto and all the policy updates, and follow us on the RHA LinkedIn or X account. They all get posted at the same time. So if there's an update, it goes social media, website, and then it goes to the membership. Something we've worked hard to improve upon, because again, one of the biggest challenges, it's not exclusive to the RHA, it's to businesses, is communicating. You can only communicate, and the number of people, stakeholders, not just members, say to me, we didn't know you did that. And it's it's a key point, that to somebody who's actually working around the RHA, it's so obvious that how could you not know? So communication is really important.
Totally agree in terms of that. And the RHA does a hell of a lot more than I was aware of. So it is really worthwhile to go and have a scrabble across their website, and perhaps go and follow them on LinkedIn, purely and simply because you'll get a grasp of what I would say are the real issues within the industry and in industry. Richard, you've recently announced a coordination and collaboration within the logistics trade and professional bodies. Could you tell our listeners why you've done this and what you believe it will achieve for the industry and your members?
So I'll take those two separate questions and bring them together at the end. So the collaboration is 11 trade associations And tentatively, this is to be agreed. We're just agreeing that a clear term of reference. So again, it's obvious to everybody what we're doing. But the name for the collaboration will probably be the Alliance of Trade Associations. Alliance of Logistics Trade Associations. So straight away, the clue is in the title. So we've got ourselves, we've got Logistics UK, we've got UQA, we've got big ports, little ports, we've got the airports, we've got parcel carriers, we've got British removals, and we've got the APM, which represents pallet networks. So we've got, not exclusively, because there's 52 logistics trade associations in this country, and we've got the 11 that provide a true representation of the logistics end-to-end process. Okay, so the reason why we established it was to bring together the 11 bodies to advance the main issues, just like the RHA's got its 6 principles, the 5 areas that are affecting the logistics industry in the wider economy. But one of the things I find, spending quite a lot of time in schools and colleges with our simulator and our training teams, is if I said to people, what does logistics mean? I could probably, if I had 5 people in front of me, I'd get 5 different answers. If I said to them, what's haulage mean? I'll probably get the 5 same answers. And so it's really to bring to purpose that logistics is actually the 100% that's in the room. And haulage is a part of that, just as the warehouse is a part of that, just as the airport plays a part of that. So it's really as basic as that seems to us that work in the industry. When you're sat in front of a stakeholder that's never really been involved in this industry, and it sits maybe in Whitehall, it's in Westminster, it's in Hollywood, it's the ability to bring a clear, concise message and a joined-up message to create one voice, that is so more powerful. So the reason why we joined together, which the RHA was one of the key drivers in, again, not exclusively, but it was something that I was very passionate about, collaboration, was to amplify in the key policy and decision makers forum the criticality of logistics. And how it's actually not just about a truck or a port or a plane, it's intrinsically linked. And we talk about the efficiency of the country. It's interestingly that there was an article that I was reading only yesterday about an industrial plan to grow the country going forward. And they were referencing we need to know what our plan is now so we can start to build the supply chains that will support that growth. Well, that's fine. This is what that is. So if government want to come and speak to what the 5 key issues, that's the association that will continue to develop. Going on to the second part of the question, it doesn't take away from any of our members what the RHA does on a day-to-day basis. It adds to that. So it gives us 11 supporters having the same voice. Because where a truck goes to a warehouse, they're seeing that same problem. There are the two that actually, I'll just touch on the 5 things that we've asked about. One is the creation of a logistics minister. So when we actually go into government, we've got a person that sits above, the 11 areas, if that makes sense, or the 11 trade associations, rather than going from DFT to DFE to DWP and back to the Cabinet Office and back to Treasury. We have that one point in that can do all of those things. We're not saying we skip shit government. We are conduit for that position that we go to start with. And the other 4 areas we're asking for, and you'll see the relevance of this in our manifesto, is around decarbonisation. So in Alt's words, it's not just about the road to net zero, it's about decarbonisation for the warehouse, for the ports, how does it all link together? Because ultimately, I think it's fair to say that the future fuels will need investment, obviously, and there will be a scarcity. There's not going to be electricity. It's not a ubiquitous good that just appears. So therefore, the prioritisation is going to be fundamental. And one that you see at this moment in time is HVO. So HVO is in short supply. Not to a point where it's going to run out. So they're prioritising. It will probably be the fuel that leads on airlines due to the fact that you can't really see any other solution to that. So it might well mean the road haulage industry will not be getting as much HVO as it would probably like as an intermediate fuel. So therefore, it might cut out the intermediate fuel of HVO and go straight to electric. So it allows us, as the 11 traders, to start to to develop our ask of government. The other area is skills. It's about the next generation, because it's not just drivers. It's about people operating warehouses. It's about people operating ports. It's about flight controllers, etc., etc. The other one is, quite surprisingly, is around trade. We want to be part of that conversation around trade, because logistics is fundamental to trade. Going back to the point we made around the RHA, time back to the manifesto, we drive business on the roads, ties into overall trade and the development of this country. So the two actually complement each other, because of the 11 members that make up that group at this moment in time, there's common matters that we agree on from each right from ownership, and there's areas that we won't. because it's different, because they'll push against each other. But actually, I see that as a strength, not a weakness, because if it was all, we agreed on everything, we wouldn't have to be driving the industry forward. We have to have different positions, but we should agree on the stuff at the top. And another reason why we did it is it's what the members have been asking for across all trade bodies. It's what the government officials, I think, have been asking for. Do you think about it from a business perspective or from a procurement perspective? When you're trying to get a clear position very quickly, you don't want 6 different views. You have an executive summary, with concise information under it from the respected specialists in those areas. So in the eyes of government, the RHA is the dedicated, largest road haulage association. We don't have the exclusive voice, but if you want to contact the broad church of this industry, large, medium and small, we're the ones. Yeah, but we share that position with Logistics UK, and we will continue to, because they represent a larger type of member that sits in a bigger space, and therefore we have common views on issues. For example, DBS, again, Direct Vision in London, and the reason I keep referencing it because it's very topical, we are collaborating on that. We've been on collaborating for 6 months because it affects their members, it affects our members, but it also affects trade potentially. It also affects the future skills, going back to the point I made about drivers' perceptions of delivering into these cities with so many restrictions, so many challenges around it. So it's a very exciting period from my recollection, and certainly from what I've been told from other people. Trade bodies have never collaborated like this before.
I've got to say, I think it is about the cleverest thing that I've seen a series of trade bodies do. I'm very, very supportive of it. Obviously, I've interviewed Claire Bottle of UCWA, and shortly I'm about to interview Phil Rowe as well from Logistics UK, and he's because I've been around a long time, I know a fair number of people. What you're doing is right. The one unbelievable I could get is that there wasn't a minister responsible for logistics and supply chain, and it was scattered to the four winds in terms of how what we've seen as a very, very connected industry, how there was almost like a failure of governance to be able to turn around and say, how do we actually address this incredibly important industry? Genuinely, it's I wouldn't describe it as, the 4th or 5th emergency service, whatever, but I would turn around and say it is the one that has the quickest impact on life if it goes wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think it's, you have to look at the challenges the country's had when it was COVID, or it was preparing for Brexit, and the way the focus came upon that logistics supply chain and continues to do so. And, just referencing Phil, I mean, Phil's been a key driver in this along with David. And it's important. I think it's a very mature thing that the trade associations are doing. And it's actually, it's supporting our membership because it's time to work together. You see, I've got 8,500 members, and I'll use Logistics UK as an example. They've got 20,000. Together, we've got 28,000. I look at things. Trade associations should not compete for membership. They should compete on behalf of their members. There's a maturity of the trade associations, and my fellow CEOs and MDs recognise that this is the way business is done. And also, it's not as easy to divide and conquer when you want.
Very, very true. So, moving towards the final elements of our interview this time round. Although I've picked up so many other bits and pieces I'd love to follow up with you on, but we have the time that we have. This might be the more pressing one. We're in the sort of final year of the current government. Certainly, I absolutely acknowledge that the RHA plays a very important part in getting the political establishment to really understand how vital the industry is. Do you have any views on the respective political parties' policies as far as the road haulage industry is concerned? Who are the saints and who are the sinners from your perspective?
It's a very interesting question, and the reason why I smile and chuckle slightly is it's a question I get asked quite often recently. And I'm not avoiding the question. This is not a political answer, because I'm not a political person. I'm really not. I'm just going straight down the middle. To answer the question of some of the key policies from the prize, the fact of the matter is that certainly from what we've seen so far, from the plans that have come out from both the current and potential future governments, there's no real clarity around the plans. I mean, they talked about an investment strategy, with one group, and yes, it's quite high level, but what does it mean in terms of the strategic road network? What does it mean in terms of investment in facilities? I do note this morning, though, that clarity is starting to come, even though it's not directly related to the RHA, but it is in terms of collaborative trade association, because I think it was announced this morning that Labour plan to invest £1.8 billion in parts for alternative, for decarbonisation, which is a high level of investment, etc., etc. That's great news. It'd be welcomed by me as the RHA, because obviously a lot of vehicles come in through ports. These lessons can be learned there, that. So as we start to get the clarity, we will comment on that and what it means to our membership into the industry. The SS2, that you could flip that around. Last August, I think it was, at the government's conference, when they announced that they were not going to complete that and reinvest the money. We start to see some of that money being reinvested, in some plans and programs. But if we're frank and open, without being political, it's actually not started yet because the timescale being too short. So what I would say to the parties, and what I do say to the parties as we meet them, because as you can imagine, we're engaging with all sorts of colours at this moment in time, we will give you a view of what the industry is, what the needs are of the industry. That's the manifesto. What the challenges are, how it ties into the economy. In a collaborative way, very happy to work with you and across your departments. But what this industry needs, and I'd say it's to everybody, it needs clarity. It needs certainty. And the only way you'll get that is through collaboration, and that will drive investment. I've referenced this before. It's not just about money. So the one thing we very rarely do actually as a trade body, certainly in the last 2 years, and I only reference 2 years because that's my tenure, is go and ask the government for money, because we know they don't have any. And if it's a change of government, the incoming government won't. Because there's certain fiscal and economic challenges, and they're probably won't happen for the next 5 years. I think there's a report from the IMF today that say, they're saying that our net borrowing position is not going to improve for the foreseeable future. So we have to work as one to drive ourselves out of where we are. So direct doses, we've not got the detail to really comment on it much more. The key areas that we would like to comment and engage with are in the manifesto, and we will be very supportive, and at the same time we will also make strong representation where we need to do, to ensure that the voice, of this industry continues to be heard, because as you've said on a number of occasions, Malcolm, in the last 45 minutes, this is a critical profession. Let's use that word. This is a profession, and let's embrace technology. Let's look forward. But nobody's going to invest in that unless they've got some sort of clarity around what it is collectively we're trying to achieve. Does that answer the question, or have I avoided quite well in the political way?
I think you've steered around that very, very well indeed. But I think that you have provided a logical answer behind it. If I might be bold, I'd give you a suggestion. I would turn around and take your 22 manifesto issues, and I would move them around to all of the key political parties and say, give me a tick, give me a cross, give me a maybe on each of these. And that's what I'd be searching. That's what I'd be searching to do, because I think you've got to engage with politics. I think it's more important now than it ever has been before. If you like, if I was giving a State of the Nation speech, I'd be looking with some concern. We're in a chaotic and crazy world, and we're not performing at our best. And one of the key connectors of making things perform particularly well is the logistics industry, and it's not as highly regarded as it should be. So we've spoken about some of the challenges in the industry, and as a sort of parting shot, what do you see as the opportunities? What's the undiscovered country out there that could be transformational? What could we be?
I think to answer that question, the one thing, we need to look at the future technologies and emerging technologies. And you mentioned it, the challenge front, I'll be sure of them. About developing the future cab. For the driver, to attract the driver in, and to embrace what talent and technology exists to build it. What the driver would actually want. What would actually practically work, and you could, you would probably end up with something that is achievable to be built today, and then we need to look forward. So if you roll that across, and then we spoke about the empty running and the efficiency of the network, the reality is, I would suggest that in the next 50 years, we're not going to increase this road network because we're an island. There are more vehicles on the road than there were 10, 15, 20 years ago. So therefore, we need to be as efficient as we can, and is to become more efficient. So again, look at what's on the road and why it's on the road. So that might sound a little strange for me saying take things off the road. I would quite embrace. I think we spoke about this previously, Malcolm, of going around on the waterways, ports to ports. Take some freight off if it works. Put some more on trains. I wouldn't quite go as far to advocate opening canals, because it's about making what we've got as efficient as it can be. And to do that, you need technology, plant technology, systems technology, vehicle technology. And also, ultimately, I'll go back to the member I went to visit recently, who was genuinely infused about the opportunities that exist. And I tell the story to him. 20 years ago, Amazon sold books, Primark didn't exist, and Woolworths was a shop. I would use that as a base to think, well, what could it look like? What could that look like in 20 years' time? What could that be? There might not be a high street. Might not be at all. Some people in some towns and cities, you can see that change is not far away from being complete. What does that look like ultimately? What's going to be driven by the consumers? It's a huge question, but it's about technology, and it's about opening your minds for the art of the possible. As you would say, ask the superhuman question, ask the difficult questions and try and answer them. But don't do it on your own, do it collectively, because collaborate, that's where the collaboration comes in. Learn from other people. Don't be the expert in the room, because those don't exist.
And with that as a conclusion, and a really intelligent conclusion, thank you. It's always wonderful to listen to your good self and what the RHA is really up to. Sincere thanks for trusting me enough to be the first interview. And I think there's cause to talk again. I hope you do.
Absolutely, Malcolm. Thank you very much. And, let's not leave it 2.5 years next time. Well,
I'm developing my listenership in the USA at the moment. So when I'm looking at my figures, about 25% of my audience is in the US. We're actually listened to more globally than you'd believe. It's a small audience overall, but it covers quite a big number of people within the logistics industry globally. So I'm very grateful that people find it entertaining enough to listen.
You talk about, 90%, 95%. Logistics is a serious business.
Very.
It's everybody's business. You're involved in logistics directly and indirectly, like it or not. So please go out there and understand what it is.
And on that conclusion, I'd like to sincerely thank Richard for his participation here, and thank you for another really stimulating and interesting podcast. If you'd like to know more about the Logistics Collective, please go and have a look at our website, logisticscollective.com. We're available on all of the normal podcast channels you can probably think of, so things like Spotify, Google, and all of the rest. And if you want an update on when we're issuing a new episode, just simply press like and follow and you'll get automatically updated. So thanks again. And goodbye for now.
You can get in contact by email, podcast@logisticscollective.com, or leave a voice message on our website, logisticscollective.com. The podcast is a production by Loguru.